who couldn't tune in today to join us. So it is my pleasure today to really my pleasure to, where am I getting the, that's Lynn, you're buzzing, there we go. To introduce Alice Johansson. Alice was at the Territorial EDS conference in Ottawa, and I sat in on her session on volunteer management. And I was just really blown away by the statistics and the research that she presented. And so with that, I quickly grabbed a hold of her and suggested that maybe we get her here to run through that presentation, as it was so informative. And Alice has been with us just about a year now, I think, at THQ. And so I'm going to turn it over to her, and she can explain a bit about what she's been doing and hopefully encourage us to be more strategic in our family services in reaching the volunteers and being effective at managing them. So Alice, it's all you. And I better unmute you so we can hear you. There we go, you're unmuted.
Thank you so much, Peter, for that warm introduction. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you today. And I especially want to thank Peter for including me and giving me this opportunity. I've actually been here at THQ in the same department for the past 5 years, but you're right, Peter, I've been in my current role since September of last year. And I don't always get the privilege of connecting with leaders at the ministry unit level very often. So this is a great opportunity for me to get to know all of you better, and hopefully you'll be encouraged to reach out to me at any time. Or anything really that you would like to discuss with regards to volunteers. So without further ado, I think we can get started with the part one presentation. And as Peter mentioned, this is going to be an introduction of hopefully what's to come next week, Tuesday, as we dig deeper into the different generations of volunteers. This is my first webinar, and I'm not very technical, so hopefully I won't be pressing any buttons I shouldn't be, Peter. But would you like me to start sharing my screen at this point so we can get started?
Yes, go ahead, dear.
Okay. Let's see. How does that look? Good, I'm hoping. Okay.
You're good to go.
Thank you. Would you mind taking the video, my video off, so we don't have to? There
Give
we
me
go.
a second or two. There we go. There you go.
That's perfect. Okay. So before we get started and start looking into different generations of volunteers that help support the work of the Salvation Army, there are a few things that I think I'll try and remember as we go through the generations. Not everyone agrees to the start and end date of each generation. So as we're going through the presentation, if you feel that you're either 5 years on this side or the other side of the spectrum, please keep in mind that, there we go. Each side can have, you can have traits of each generation, and if that's who you identify with, you can, you're known as a bridger, which is basically an individual who helps two different groups get along. So if we start by looking at the first generation, which is the our traditionalists, they tend to be between the ages of 74 and 94. And today in Canada, there's a population of approximately 3 million traditionalists, which is 8% of the population today. This is a very patriotic generation that's extremely loyal to institutions. They value teamwork, and they really have huge respect for authority. They're disciplined and consistent, and they really have a defined sense of what's right and wrong. They don't really want to waste anybody's time or any resources, and they don't really want anything back, other than to give to us and other organizations with the experience that they've gained in life. Some of the defining moments for this generation were the Great Depression and World War II. So these are individuals who have been raised by parents that just really survived the Great Depression. They've experienced really hard times while growing up, but then the hard times have been followed by times of prosperity, which has formed them into the individuals that they are. They're historically known to be the most generous generation to this day, and donating approximately around just over $700 a year to organizations. They're a really trusting group of people, and their decision to support an organization, whether it's by giving or volunteering their time, is really based on their values and the trust that they have for the organizations that they choose to support. So they're not really in a huge need to see impact reports or financial statements to show where their money or their time is going. So this group has a tendency to gravitate to large, well-known and long-standing organizations such as the Salvation Army. They like to follow rules, and they show respect to the individuals that they work with. But they also need to feel that their experience and feelings are valued. And when they decide to get involved in whatever task it is, they really like to have clearly explained to them what's expected of them, and they want to have the procedure outlined. Some points of caution when dealing with this tradition is that they're really least likely to accept change or try new things. And everything is black and white. So we really need to be very formal and strict and have outlined expectations when we work together with individuals from this generation. The generation that follows the traditionalists are the baby boomers. And you have an age range between 54 and 73 years of age. And again, please remember, the age ranges can differ 5 years either way. You have approximately just over 9.5 million of baby boomers in Canada. So 26% of the population belongs to this generation. They're very competitive and goal-oriented, and it's a really hard-working generation. We know that 1 in 5 Canadians of baby boomers today are working past the age of 65, and they do not plan to retire at all. They have the highest divorce rate and second marriages in history. And they're post-war babies, so they grew up to be the radicals of the 70s and the yuppies of the 80s. They're very engaged with digital, but they still do love to receive direct mail. And although our traditionalists were the historically the most generous generation, we know that the baby boomers today give the most to organizing. Last year, I think baby boomers supported an average of 4.6 charities. And this generation really loves stories of impact, but they also like the stories to be backed by financial results. So this is a significant difference between baby boomers and traditionalists when it comes to decision making and which organization they decide to support. When engaged over social media, this is still the generation that uses Facebook, and they really love engagement and community. When working with baby boomers, we really need to pay some attention into recognizing them, and giving them proper titles is really important to them as well. We need to include our impact stories to tell them the big picture and how their service matters, because that's what continues to motivate them. Because they are very hardworking, they do expect everyone to be as hardworking as this generation is, which could sometimes create some disagreements when baby boomers interact with other generations that don't have the same values when it comes to working hard. And they do like to follow the rules as long as it benefits them. So that's something that's good to keep in mind as well. And this is a generation that really introduced the concept of consumer mentality to volunteering. They have very defined skills that they've earned in the corporate world throughout years and years of hard work. And because of the age group that baby boomers are in, we need to keep in mind that they do need flexible schedules, because they take care of grandchildren and they have aging parents, and they do still work either part-time or full-time. And then we have our next group, which is Generation X. This generation is between the ages of 39 and 53, 19%, approximately 7.2 million of Canada's population today are Gen Xers. They're very resourceful and independent. And although our baby boomers were really hardworking and all they really know is hard work, this is a generation that has started to find the work-life balance. So it's not all about work, but it's also about family and friends. They really appreciate feedback and recognition, and they value outcome over process. So it really doesn't matter how the work is being done as long as it's being done. Growing up, this generation has learned how to use technology. And 40% of this generation are latchkey kids. So these are basically children that were left home alone without adult supervision after school until their parents returned from work. And being latchkey kids, their perceptions are shaped by growing up having to take care of themselves early. They've watched many of their politicians lie, and they've seen their parents get laid off. And really defining legacy for this generation, they've changed the way that business is done. I think about Sergey Brin and Larry Page, who are the founders of Google, and I don't think I can even remember a life without Google existing. The energy crisis and 24 constantly being on media is really defining moments for this generation. They value both print and digital, and that's really good to keep in mind when communicating with them, just trying to find a good balance between how much communication they receive in print versus digital. And this generation is really approaching their prime giving years. They are ready to take their giving action to the next level. And they can be reached through both traditional channels as well as emerging. They do tend to do a bit more research on the organizations they choose to support. So it's really important for us to be available with the appropriate information, whether it's on our websites or other channels, in order to be approachable to this generation. Although they can be motivated by receiving direct mail pieces, they also have a tendency to mostly donate online. And when drafting communication to this generation, it's important to keep in mind that personalization is really key and can help sway a Gen Xer either way. They do enjoy to work with leadership. It's okay to be informal, and we really need to not micromanage when dealing with this group, because we need to give them the freedom to accomplish the tasks in the way that they find suitable. Again, remember, outcome is more important than process. The results is the only thing that counts. And some flexibility in terms of tasks and duties is also a good thing to keep in mind for Gen Xers. Our beloved millennials are the next generation, and they are anywhere between the ages of 19 and 38. Approximately 26% of the population in Canada today are millennials. This is a generation who not only learned to deal with technology, they grew up with technology. So to give you some perspective, I think the oldest ones in this generation were around 26 years old when the iPhone came out in 2007. And the youngest were still in primary school, so around the ages of 7. And this is a generation that could be with our organization for the coming 50 years. We know that in 2013, which is the most recent research I have access to, 88% of millennials donated to charity. Although maybe not huge amounts, still potentially these could be our future major gift donors and also future and current volunteers. It's a very tolerant generation that really wants to make a difference. They're very good at multitasking, and they're relaxed and spiritual in nature and enjoy collaborating. They really love working in teams, and I see more and more with this generation, even when they are reaching out to us as an organization, they're really looking for volunteer opportunities as a team. Either it's with friends or coworkers or as sports teams. They really enjoy doing things together in a group. And they want us to show them how they can make a difference when they work with us. Some of the defining moments for this generation are terrorism, unfortunately, and 9/11, and instant media, social media. When coaching and guiding these individuals, it's good to keep in mind that they do not deal well with failure, and they really respond poorly to those who demand respect just because of rank. So when working with them, we need to have a strategic plan in terms of these are the expectations and these are the steps that you need to take to get to your goal, to reach your goals. And they do enjoy structure and supervision. And last but not least is the Generation Z. So yeah, move over millennials, because this is really the generation for everybody to focus on. We also call them the selfie generation, and as I'm sure you have noticed as well as I, this generation is totally absorbed by their cell phones and self-image. It's a generation who can't really remember a world without the internet. They grew up swiping an iPad before they learned how to talk, and they're really the first generation to be raised in the era of smartphones. And teenage members of this generation are connected nearly every waking hour of the day. They're also very entrepreneurial. So they've been raised with businesses such as Uber and Airbnb, and they've seen how easy and simple it is to use your own time and resources to make money. Research tells us that 72% of older members of Gen Z want to start their own business. And diversity is also something that has been a reality in the world. So the idea of a president of color, for example, is not really exceptional to them. It's normal. they've grown up experiencing diversity, and they feel overwhelmingly positive about this. I know that formal generations have had quite distinct lines that are no longer distinct for this generation. The lines in life are quite blurry. Technology has blurred the lines between home and work, study and entertainment, and public and private. So they also have a different experience of family in this generation. Working moms, stay-at-home dads, three-parent families, couples choosing not to have children. This is all reality to this generation. And being a teenager today is really a draining full-time job for them that includes doing homework, managing a social media identity, and even fretting about career and climate change and racism and you name it. So it's a generation that's quite overwhelmed, which also comes across when we interact with them in terms of the volunteer environment. And it's really a lonely generation. Research tells us that 3 million between the ages of 12 to 17 have had a major depressive episode in the past year. And there's been an increase in anxiety and depression amongst high school students since 2012. And this really cuts across all demographics, really. Despite of this, they seem to be a hopeful generation. Most of them plan to get married and have children and buy a home, although probably later than previous generations. They're less likely to drink, smoke, and take drugs, and yet they hold a more progressive views on issues like legality of marijuana and other issues in society. And what's really key to important with them is that they're really individualistic. So they're so used to having everything personalized just for them, from playlists to news feeds to products. They've really grown up expecting that everything is about them. So we need to remember this as we're crafting ways to reach out to them with volunteer opportunities or communication in general. And it's really quite, we do have a tendency to be either overly romantic or critical about new generations, but the reality is that they really face the same life challenges as previous generations, but in a super connected and rapid moving technological age. So we need to remember that they still have the same deep need of love and significance and meaning and belonging as any other generation. And I think when we focus on the part 2 of this webinar, hopefully a lot of this will start to make sense as we dig deeper into with the traits that these generations have, how do we approach them differently. This is the last slide of my presentation for today, and just really summarizes the different generations and how they view authority and what they're motivated by and what we need to think about when it comes to recruiting and leading them. So our traditionalists, they don't really question authority. It's always been there. It's just the way it should be. And all they're really motivated by is their experience. So as long as they feel that the years that they've put in and the experience they've gained is valued, they keep to give. And when reaching out to them, that's really one key thing for us to focus on, that we need to make them feel that their experience is still needed. The baby boomers are still impressed by authority, and they want to be given a chance to make a lasting legacy. So when talking to them, we just need to focus on the activity that they're giving their time to and how that makes a lasting legacy, and not really focusing on the age range too much. And they really value experience when it comes to their leaders. Gen Xers could not care less about authority. They're quite unimpressed. And the motivation is really, they just want a task and they want to get it done. How it's done doesn't really matter as long as it's done. So when communicating with them, Really need to keep in mind not to oversell what we're offering, but simply keep to the facts. Millennials, a relaxed generation that are driven by knowing that they absolutely can make a change, and the organization that they choose to support really needs to be a cause. And they want to contribute to the leadership as well. And lastly, Generation Z, again, going back to the roots, starting to respect authority and the structure that it comes with. And they're really motivated by, again, making a mark and making a change in both workplace and culture and society in general. And when trying to reach out to this generation, I think we just need to keep in mind that we need to keep the application process as short and seamless as possible, and also knowing that this is the entrepreneurs of the future. So even when it comes to the leadership, we need to foster those traits that they have when communicating with them. So before we leave over to take questions from you if you have, I just want to say that we will recap shortly this part one when we go into part two next week, but we will absolutely look in detail into more what the Canadian volunteer landscape looks like, and knowing the differences between the generations. How are we actually going to acquire them and make them feel valued and retain them to stay with our organizations for many years to come, hopefully. Peter, I'm gonna let you do the technological things in the background if people have any questions for me at this point.
Yeah, so as Alice just mentioned, we're going to dig a little deeper into the next session next week about these particular generations and how we can recruit and, more importantly, retain them. But for today's discussion, we'll open up the mics here. I think it'd be great for us to sort of have this discussion about what we're seeing in our units for volunteers. Are you seeing traditionalists, boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Zs? Who are you seeing, and how does what Alice presented today sort of jive or align with what you're seeing in your unit? So I'm going to unmute you and invite some conversation here as soon as I find my unmute all. There we go. And folks, you're unmuted, so go ahead and ask Alice some questions.
Good.
Do we have questions? Oh, no takers. Yeah.
Well, I can speak to who we have as volunteers at our ministry unit, and they're traditionalists and baby boomers, and we don't have. I'm Gen X myself, and everybody that volunteers here is older than me. So I appreciate the part where you said about baby boomers working really hard and wanting everyone to work as hard as they do, because our baby boomers are exactly like that. They expect everyone to stay late and to come early, and so they really fit that.
Absolutely.
And is that a challenge, though? I know for me, as I was listening to Alice present that, I was thinking of the boomer that was, in my unit, and with that work ethic, how that influenced or sometimes disrupted some of the volunteer opportunities.
Oh, well, for us, it worked out that the baby boomers are all friends, and so they all come on the same day. So it actually is it's pretty balanced. But you can see the different energy in our food bank on different days, you know, depending on who's there.
And I really appreciate, sorry, Peter.
No,
I really appreciate your comments, Caroline. And I think the first step for us is just to acknowledge that we actually do have different generations of volunteers that at some point either need to work in their own groups or need to interact with each other. So because all different generations come with different traits and skill sets, then it becomes important for us to have a strategy of how we want to utilize the specific skill sets that they come with, and build a healthy environment for all of them to work together.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know what motivates them, especially for the millennials and the Gen Z generations, like to encourage them and to be part of that change that they want to see.
Absolutely, and I think we'll be going into that a bit more next week during our next session. And as Peter mentioned, I had the presentation during the EDS conference, and a part of the presentation was also a workshop that we conducted. So we had small groups sit together once the presentation was over to kind of brainstorm on what they thought at the local level for them they could do with different generations to kind of motivate and retain them. So those are also some facts that I can share with you during our next session.
I'd be curious to hear from the units that are participating today what their response has been with Gen X or millennials. Looking at the stats that Alice has presented, we've got almost 50% of our volunteer base in those two generations. And what are you seeing in your units in relation to that? And are they volunteering? Is it a struggle for you? What's that look like for you in your community? No takers? No nibblers?
I think sometimes, Peter, it's also helpful to sit on the questions for a while and digest them and really sit back and think about the volunteer pool that we all have and how different it is based on geographical location and the type of work that we do, and then kind of know the differences that we are experiencing with the different generations.
I can speak into our core, which is the Wyerton core. We are very much a tourist area, so in the summer we're very, very busy around the city and the Bruce Peninsula, and during the winter it's all people that live here full time, and those are usually the traditionals and the baby boomers. There is some Generation X people that have moved from the city and decided not to do city life. So you have those, you know, have those couples that want to like live on a farm and grow their own vegetables and all of that kind of stuff. But they're often very busy with work, right? And most of our programs are, not most of them, but maybe half of our programs are during the day. So the opportunities for anybody in the evening is like a kids club or a youth drop-in for the evening, which doesn't give them much time to volunteer. So to focus on those, we would have to run a program in the evening, right? Or be creative and get them to do things at night that help the daytime programs. Like, so they would more a group, like you were saying, a group chore or something that they could do on a Saturday or in the evening in the summer. So just figuring that out would be a challenge.
And I really appreciate your comments on that, Linda, and I totally agree. And I think, again, we'll be going into this more in depth during our next session, but more and more with everybody's schedules becoming busier as we move on, especially with Gen Xers and even millennials who have young families, I think it's really important for us to be a bit more creative. Volunteering becomes quality family time for many of these young families. So just trying to create opportunities where they can actually come together as a family, whether it's husband and wife and children or siblings or a family reunion, and be able to provide group volunteer opportunities that they can use to kind of spend some time together and pass on the values to their children, I think.
Yeah. And the big thing is we have lots of volunteers at Christmas because they all come up to the cottages at Christmas time and they want to have that experience to help, right? So that's when you get the families, and knowing Salvation Army in the Christmas season is our busiest season, and sometimes we don't have enough resources to pay attention to those more individual family volunteer needs, right? So it's more group participation during the day.
Absolutely, Linda. And I think that's a really good reminder for all of us as an organization, I think, especially with volunteers. We really need to start being a bit more proactive. So instead of reacting to the need that we have during Christmas, knowing that the time will come and knowing that we will have those groups looking for opportunities, it's good for us to kind of start thinking about that during the more quiet times of the year.
Maggie sent us a chat question. She recognizes that we're not allowed to give gifts to our volunteers, but are there incentives that we can let our volunteers know that they're appreciated and access those for us to make use of them?
Absolutely, and I think, Peter, it's again, I think the first thing to be looked at when you want to recognize your volunteers is to look at which generation they belong to as well, because different generations appreciate different things, and there are so many things that you can do reaching out to your volunteers, and that's again something that I could actually include in our next session that would speak to generations.
And Debbie over in Belleville shares, we have volunteers from 16 to 85, and I love putting the students with older volunteers. It's a great opportunity for students to learn some great work ethics. And Maggie echoed in on that. That's been working for us at East Toronto.
Absolutely, and I think, again, in a lot of research, we can see that a lot of our volunteers actually are looking for mentoring and coaching opportunities when it comes to volunteering. So it's for us as an organization to, again, look over the volunteer opportunities that we're offering, and maybe instead of being stuck in our old ways, trying to be a bit more creative and create different opportunities where we actually can utilize the skill sets that they have. And looking at the younger generation, if you look at Gen Zs, I know that when we talk about discrimination, and again, we'll talk more about this next time, but the young ones that we are dealing with really experience age discrimination. So they feel that they approach the organization and they want to offer the skill sets that they have, but we often look at them as the little ones who really don't have much to offer and need our help and guidance. So kind of having that shift of mindset as well, and looking at each individual without any preconceptions and trying to utilize what they have to offer is key for us.
Debbie also shares she's speaking to the students at Loyalist College tomorrow and on the importance of volunteering. So maybe you could Zoom Alice in as well and have her add to your speaking engagement.
I think it's wonderful, and it really warms my heart every time I hear about us reaching out to our youth. And I think obviously I will be talking to you, taking a few minutes once we're done with the question portion of this, to let you know some updates about what we're working on here, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some tools moving forward to actually do these presentations and reach out to youth as well.
Are there any other questions for Alice this afternoon? She's the expert. You've got her online, and you can certainly poke her. If anything, I think she can handle it.
And even if you don't feel like poking me right now, you're more than welcome to reach out to me by email or by phone at any time. I would be more than happy.
Oh, here's a question for you.
Mm.
Does the Salvation Army have a common database that is moving towards in the near future?
Save the best question for last, did you?
It just came in. I blame it on Linda.
Yeah. I can ask questions out loud if you want about it, but I didn't know if that topic you wanted to bring up.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, Linda. Thank you so much. So, just to give you a little bit background, and I don't know if any of you or your units were approached with this, but my predecessor a couple of years ago started a pilot project to bring on hopefully ministry units across the territory to use Volunteer Hub as the database that was chosen at that time. That was launched as a pilot project to multiple different locations across the territory. And sadly, shortly after the pilot project was launched, she left the organization. And that was left unattended for quite a while. And when I started in this position back in September, I started digging a bit deeper into what Volunteer Hub looked like and what it had to offer. And I have been approached by ministry units since September of last year asking me how that's going and what the future plan for that is. And my honest answer to them has been, based on what I've learned of Volunteer Hub until now, I'm not 100% sure it can really meet the needs that we have and the customization that our organization requires to make the system work for us. I think it's a wonderful system. I just don't believe it has the capacity to cater to 400 plus ministry units as a national database. Another challenge that we really have to keep in mind when it comes to the database is, because our role here at THQ is really to provide tools and guidance, and it's not going to be a system that's going to be mandated. It needs to be something that we can choose moving forward, that can really be a decision that we make together with the ministry units and really dig deep into the needs that they have and the customization that they need at the level to make it work. So I think for now, we can say that Volunteer Hub might not be the system that will work, although it was launched as a pilot project. We can say that the pilot probably did not go as well as expected, and then we need to focus on moving forward with finding a system that does work. Before doing that, though, I do think that we have some other challenges that we need to overcome, and some other tools that we need in terms of national policies, templates, job templates for our volunteer positions. I know that in my conversation with Lynn Cummings, and she's been a great asset as well as I've been trying to figure this role out. I know that she's talked about a one-stop shop where you can actually have all the tools that you need at the ministry unit level to be able to steward and really care for your volunteers as you need. So that's absolutely something that I have on my priority list. And we need to get through some of those steps before we can even start considering a national database at this point.
So if I can just speak into what we're using, I believe the ONGL is using Better Impact. I would think maybe our core is using it the most. Other cores use it just for kettles. So I guess my question is, I'm putting a lot of time and effort into that. It's customizable, and I don't want to put all my effort into it if you're going to go in another direction.
I think again,
I guess my question is a database in the near future or the longer term?
I would say, thinking about it realistically, I would say I don't think we'll have a national database in the coming year. I think a year or two at least before we can absolutely do our due diligence and choose a system that can work for us. And I think something that has also changed, which is a bit of a restriction for us as an Army, is we really need to choose a provider that hosts the data in Canada. And a lot of the bigger vendors host the data in the US, which is just not going to work for us as an organization, although a lot of other organizations can make that work. And Better Impact is actually one of the few that hosts their data in Canada.
Yeah.
And I think we would be more than willing to have more discussions with them to explore.
Yeah. So I keep pushing it to get better, I guess. All right. Thank you.
No worries. And I do absolutely understand the need and urgency of having a database that would work for all of us. I can say that I think that at least 90% of our units across the territory are currently even just using Excel sheets that works for them. We do need to think ahead with the size of our organization in the coming 5 years. I really do think that even when you think about risk management and mitigating risk, a national database would help all of us in many different ways. But there are some other steps that we need to take before we get there.
That's good. Good answer.
Very good answer. I think the other thing I just echo with what Alice is saying was the key point of the tools and the resources. I think that's a critical piece that's being worked on right now. And Major Lynn, is there anything that you'd like to echo in on that? I want to invite you. We've got a divisional volunteer expert joining us today, so I don't want to miss out and put all the pressure on Alice. But Major, is there anything that you could echo or want to step in? I see your head shaking. So
I'm no expert. I learned by trial and error. I can't wait for this toolbox to come. My dream, like I've told Alice, is one-stop shopping, where we can just click a button and the documents are there that we need volunteers to sign, because every ministry unit seems to be fumbling and kind of creating their own documents. And I think if we're all on the same page, we would look better as an organization when it comes to volunteers. We would, I think, come out on the top side when it comes to accreditations and core reviews and internal audits. This is an area that's often brought to my attention after an audit or a review or an accreditation has been done, that certain pieces are missing. And as I've said to Alice, I think those who are doing accreditations, those who are doing audits, we need to be on the same page with the same language in the documentation that they're asking for, because it seems to be a different understanding for one than the other. So I can't wait for that one-stop shopping, and I know it takes time, and Alice is working hard on it. And yeah, we need to be all on the same page and make it easier for our ministry units to get the paperwork that we require of them in case something should happen. So really, it would make it easier for them, and they would feel a bit better by doing, by having everything there for them.
Thank you, Lynn. And just I'm being mindful of the time, so I'm just going to quickly share some updates with you on what's happening here. Although the software is currently not moving forward rapidly, there are some other things that I'm trying to push forward as fast as I can. And I can't tell you enough how appreciative I am at this time, because this is really a unique opportunity for me to reach out to the Ministry of Units directly. So just want to share with you a couple of things that are happening. And I know, Lynn, you've mentioned the one-stop shop and then you can retire. So I'm going to try not to do it as quickly as
You better hurry.
we don't want you to retire yet. But the goal is, and I'm sure you all know, that we're eventually going to be moving away from Lotus Notes. When and how that's going to happen, I don't know. But I reviewed the manuals that we have for volunteers, whether it's the territorial one or the divisional one. And I think we can all agree that they're long and wordy and outdated. So I think the vision for the one-stop shop will be a place, whether it's on Lotus or whether it's on salvationist.ca or My Army, wherever it makes the most sense. I think the vision is to have the shop for volunteers there. And I think what I'm hoping to include there is job description templates for the most commonly used volunteer opportunities that we have across the territory that can be downloaded and modified as needed. We're going to have all the forms that you will need that you can also easily download there. I'm also working on a risk assessment matrix that's hopefully going to be presented to the Territorial Management Board in July. And once that goes through the process that it needs to go through, it's going to be a wonderful tool that you can use, which basically outlines 33 of the volunteer positions that we all have. And there's been a risk assessment done for all the positions that basically gives you a risk level and helps you to define if somebody's peeling potatoes or if somebody's teaching Sunday school, what is the process they need to go to? What are the controls that need to be in place? What are the forms that they need to fill out? When do they need to do a police check and background check? And when can they just go ahead and not have to do that? So all of that will be outlined for you. So there's not going to be a guessing game anymore, and it's going to be outlined and structured. And I will be here, and one of my main responsibilities will be to work with the Ministry directly if needed, or divisional headquarters, to maybe go through if you're having some uncertainties on how to use that. So that's going to be in the toolbox as well. And another thing that we're doing is currently evaluating how we're communicating with our volunteers. And I know that you don't have a volunteer budget, most of you, at the ministry level or divisional level. My budget is not very large either, but the little budget that I've had, we've chosen to work with a third-party vendor and create a welcome package that will also be a part of the toolbox. That's something that you can download digitally and you can use to welcome and onboard your volunteers. We're going to rebrand the volunteer program so it looks the same and feels the same and smells the same across the territory, but again, can be modified to cater to your local needs. And a part of that has been, and I know, Lynn, that as one of our divisional coordinators, you've helped me a lot with this, but we're trying to conduct a survey to our volunteers to try and find out how they feel about the Salvation Army, why they choose to volunteer with us, and how we can make sure that the experience feels meaningful to them. And this is a survey that's going to go out on June 10th. Through our divisional volunteer coordinators, I've tried to reach out to the ministry units and have given them the option to either, if they choose, share the names and email addresses of their volunteers with us here so that we can send out the survey, or there's also an option for us to provide you with the survey link you can send directly to your volunteers. So if that's something that your ministry unit wishes to participate in, I think it would be beneficial to all of us. As many volunteers as we can get involved and make their voices heard, I think that's going to help us into which direction we need to go in, so that we can serve them and provide them with the best volunteer experiences possible. So if that's something that you would be interested in, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly by email or through Peter, or however way you find it more convenient to do so that we can move along with it.
Well, Debbie says she's already submitted her list and her volunteers are excited to participate. Rose wants to get in on the survey. So folks, if you're interested in that, get a hold of Alice. You can see it, Alice_Johansson@can.salvationarmy.
Yes.
She's on Lotus. She'll be happy, I think, more than happy to connect with you. We also had a question or a comment. Let me just see if I can scroll up. From Maggie, and I think, Maggie, on your question, what I'll suggest is you contact Alice directly on that. She was just inquiring about having the forms on their own ministry unit website. So I think that's something that you could, Maggie, talk to Alice about directly, and Alice could answer that, a little bit stronger and more directly to your unit and what you're thinking. Folks, it's almost 1 o'clock. Is there any last pressing questions to ask Alice to let her off the hook here, or give her a break?
I'm your cheerleader, Alice. You keep going, girl.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much.
I think we all want to cheer Alice on. I think all of us have struggled in volunteer recruitment and retention, and so today's session, getting a better idea of the generations and their values, their goals, has been very good. Rose just asked the last question here. What is the best advertising you are using to recruit volunteers?
I think, again, that depends on the generation, but I think a short answer to that is we'll be looking at the Canadian volunteer landscape next week as well, as you know.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to cut you off. I wasn't going to let you answer. I was going to say that's going to be our teaser for next week.
Yes, will be answered in the coming week.
Stay tuned. Same bat channels, same station, folks. We're going to have Alice back again. We're going to dive into this, and we're going to look at what does it really mean now to recruit and retain these volunteers. So next week, same time, same day, next Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's Toronto, of course, because that's what we live. Sorry for you folks out in BC. But we'll get you back here, Alice. I want to thank Alice for her time today. Really appreciate the heads up on what's coming down the pipe for us all. And folks, as you spend the next week just taking a look at things, start thinking about what you want to ask her next week. And we'll really test her next week. Anything, last comment is yours, Alice. Anything you want to end on?
I just want to tell you, I feel extremely blessed for you to have given me this hour, and I really look forward to connecting with you again next week, and hopefully more weeks to come after that, as we continue to work together as a team to enhance the experience for our volunteers.
Fantastic. Well, folks, that's it for today. We will get you next week, and let's pick it up from there. Alice, thank you so much for leading this session, and Major Lynn for your input. And folks, this session's been recorded and will be available later this week for you to look at. And Alice will be submitting her PowerPoint presentation so you can all get those slides. And they will be available on saministryresources.ca under the core ministry under family services. Wish you a blessing as you go into your ministry units across the territory. Lord bless you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.